Yeah, one of my favourite quotes in the book is from Einstein, and Einstein said, "In theory, theory and practice are the same. In practice, they're different." And I think that highlights to me that it's one thing to have the knowledge. It's one thing, for example, to know that there are three pillars of trustworthiness, ability, integrity, and benevolence. But how do I put that into practice? And the key to putting it into practice is developing new habits. I'm an executive coach. I work with leaders to help them change their behaviour. Sometimes that involves new knowledge, but often it's about the hard work of creating new habits. Some people think that you can't create new habits, but I think we all know people who've given up smoking. It's not easy, but when people have got the willpower and the motivation, they can make those changes of habits. And in the book, I talk about 9 habits to focus upon if you want to build your trustworthiness as a leader. And the message that I'm putting over is very much in line with the thinking of a guy called David Marquette. David Marquette is an author. He wrote the book Turn the Ship Around, and one of the things he said in that book was that bosses think their way to new actions, but leaders act their way to new thinking. And I think that was a really interesting way of turning the table to say, actually, if you start creating new habits, it can also then help you think about things differently as well. So focus on the habits first and do the practice and the daily hard yards of changing habits. So in the book I talk about 9 habits. Some of those habits would be familiar to leaders. So I talk about choosing to deliver, choosing to be honest, choosing to coach others. I think those are words that we're quite familiar with in business. Other habits that I talk about I think will be more novel for business leaders. In particular, I talk about choosing to evangelise and choosing to be kind as 2 very important habits under that pillar of benevolence that can really transform the trust-building presence of leaders. Evangelise is an interesting word. When you use it, people immediately think maybe it's got religious connotations, but evangelise is really as simple as spreading the good news. And we talked earlier about we live in a world where social media is spinning news around us 24 hours a day, and a lot of that news might have a cynical, negative view of the world of business. So if business leaders are going to counter that, they need to get on the front foot and evangelise. They need to spread the good news about what business is doing and how it's contributing to the world. Guy Kawasaki wrote a book called The Art of Evangelism, and he said in the social age, evangelism is everyone's job. And I think that's true. I think that leaders can't think that they will outsource this to a PR department to do for them. I think every leader needs to be thinking on a daily basis, how do I spread the good news about my business? One of the great role models for evangelism, I think, is Paul Polman. Paul Polman is the CEO of Unilever, one of the world's largest organisations, 172,000 employees around the globe. And Unilever has what they call a sustainable living plan that they've implemented since 2009, and they promote that plan very proactively. For example, they have now been able to measure that they have impacted the health and well-being of 397 million people around the globe, which is 40% of the way to their 2020 target. So they have targets for this, they measure it and they communicate it, and that is great evangelism. Choosing to be kind, I've worked with many organisations over the last 30 years. I've never yet come across the word kindness in a leadership competency framework. Why is that? Well, I think we've lived in an era when the leader was considered to be the strong, masculine role model, charging into battle, ruthlessly destroying the enemy. But again, I think that paradigm is changing. I think we're living in a different world, and I think care, kindness, concern are critical aspects of this pillar of benevolence and trustworthiness. I think leaders who are brave to step into being kind to their stakeholders will see that have a dramatic impact on their ability to inspire trust. There's a phrase that I talk about in the book from a lady called Anne Herbert, where she said, practice random acts of kindness and senseless acts of beauty. And I think that's a lovely way of summing this up. Random acts of kindness. What random acts of kindness are we each performing each day to our stakeholders? And these don't have to be major groundbreaking headlines like finding a cure for cancer. They're often very small, thoughtful, tiny noticeable things that we can offer to the people we work with and people we work for that might make their day, that might just light them up and give them that feeling that we care for them above and beyond their role as a stakeholder in our business. And I think when we get treated that way, that can take the trust that we have in someone and in a leader to a completely new level.